We've got Nicole Wallace and Steve Kornacki in place. Guys, good morning to both of you.
Can we start by talking about this alleged quid pro quo between the FBI and the State Department? I'll start with you, Nicole. Both of those entities have denied that anything like this happened. They said these were parallel discussions. But what at least are we learning about the way the Clinton team worked to lessen the fallout from these emails based on what we're hearing?
Well, Savannah, you asked me a question last week about how all of these stories, this drip, 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 reinforces her central weakness. The central weakness of her candidacy, going back to the beginning of the Democratic primary, was that people had a feeling that they couldn't trust her. And yesterday in Ohio, I met with undecided voters, and that follows her around. That is the burden that she carries, and all politicians carry a burden. That is hers. This story underscores it. And if Donald Trump had the capacity for discipline, this could really be damaging to her.
Let me just follow up and say, so you don't believe that the words Clinton and email have run their course in this election cycle?
Not only have they not run their course in this election cycle, but if she were running against someone who had the capacity for any sort of sustained, disciplined campaign against her, they really could have proven fatal. But because she's running against someone who steps on his own message every 15 minutes, I don't think that this will ever sort of dominate the news they would if she were running against someone other than Donald Trump.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is kind of fighting a two-front war, certainly against Hillary Clinton, and he is saying a lot about this latest example, the alleged quid pro quo. He's also going against Paul Ryan, leaders of the Republican Party, and the election system in this country at large. And now we're seeing top Republicans, including Marco Rubio just last night in the debate, visibly irritated about this notion that our system is problematic or corrupt.
This is example number 1,500, I think, in this campaign of Donald Trump putting Republican leaders in a very uncomfortable position and forcing them to make that choice. Do you want to be loyal to your party's nominee and go very, very, very far out on a limb on an issue, or do you want to stay truer to sort of the traditional rules, the traditional norms of politics? And you can see that clip you played from Marco Rubio. He is making them squirm. He's making them very uncomfortable. There's also evidence some of these Republican candidates out there, when they try to distance themselves from Trump in the interest of helping themselves in the general election, they might be hurting themselves with Trump's voters.
Nicole, Melania Trump went out last night and defended her husband on two fronts. One, saying that he was egged on in that tape conversation with Billy Bush. The other, that these women who've now come forward accusing him of sexual misconduct are showing questionable timing. I guess that's the best way to put it. Did she help or hurt her husband with women voters last night?
Spouses are always net positive, and spouses are usually held harmless from even sort of the dirtiest sides of their spouses' campaigns. And I think that holds mostly true for Melania. The problem with what Melania did last night was the timing. It took so long. It might have been helpful the weekend that the tape broke, but 10 days out, I think we saw a poll that 90% of Americans were aware of the tape or had seen the tape. I'm just not sure she had the ability or the potential to change hearts and minds with her message last night.
You ready to take a little walk?
Let's do it.
We want to talk about something now. We've been talking a lot about polling with 3 weeks to go until Election Day. So Steve is going to help us out by looking back at some past presidential elections. We'll look at where the polling was 3 weeks out from that election and where it ended up. Let's start in 2012.
So the most recent election, look, 3 weeks out, Barack Obama was ahead 5 points in our NBC Wall Street Journal poll. We can show you what happened in the election. It's pretty much right there. It was 51-47. There you go, 51-47. Basically, 3 weeks out, that was the result.
Showing that people make up their minds, and 3 weeks usually doesn't change much. Does the same hold true when we go back to 2008 and McCain and Obama?
This is a little interesting because right now our poll in this race has it at double digits. This poll in 08 had it at double digits 3 weeks out. And look, it was a solid win for Obama, but if you look at the final result, it did tighten a little bit. So what you saw in those final weeks was what looked like a blowout. Some of those Republican voters came home in the end. That might be something to look for in the home stretch here.
Let's go back to an election that we'll talk about in schools for decades to come, 2000, Bush and Gore.
Yeah, so here, look, 3 weeks out, we had Bush ahead 6 points. Now, this was one of the bigger margins he had, but he did lead down the stretch. The interesting thing to remember, this is forgotten because of the recount. In the final days of that race, there was that story about George W. Bush and a DUI from years earlier, and a lot of people think that's why Gore caught him at the end in the popular vote, but not the electoral college.
So it is possible that there can be a late October surprise
or an early November surprise.
Exactly right. Steve, thank you very much. Savannah?
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. And again, the debate is on Wednesday night, 9 o'clock on NBC.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.